Hey, are you using mushrooms? Today's episode, here I am, Dr. Lisa, introducing you to Nurse Practitioner Lora Solomon. I asked that question because Laura is a leading nurse practitioner, a now published author, speaker, and workshop facilitator on plant medicine, particularly doing the advocacy with expertise, working with those transcending trauma. And I have known Laura now, oh gosh, since early 2000s, 2007, 8 or so. We were working here in the Charlotte region, crossed paths. I also worked at a practice that she had started with her first husband, doing with my belly guru work with OBGYN. So we had a lot to talk about then, but little did we know the paths our lives were going on. And it was just such a blip in time, but definitely have come back together. She has her Sacred Rebellion podcast, and she's been doing work uh, excavating the impact of trauma and facilitating neurological rewiring, which is all about the mind body. You know, I run Mind Body Brand Academy specifically for these types of wonderful medicine women on the rise to get themselves packaged up and doing things. And she's been doing a lot of work around the power of healing, strong business development with her certifications in functional medicine and things like that. Went the traditional route, now is doing things more on her own. She moved out of the Charlotte area and she's now in the lovely South Carolina regions. I think she's down in the the Charleston areas or whatnot. But we do have an offer on the show notes that I definitely, if you listen to this podcast in terms of the work with plant-based medicines and working with trauma, and you're super interested, definitely reach out to her. She has a wonderful course which we have on our show notes for you guys listening to the Owning Her Health podcast, as well as her program working on the impact of trauma through her book. And I will also have the link to her book directly as well on the show notes. So without further ado, let's listen in to Laura and I talking about plant medicine, trauma, mind body, all the things that are going right outside the traditional healthcare system right now.
Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. We'll walk the goddess path less traveled together to respectfully debate, supportively co-create, and wildly celebrate the unique passion, gratitude, and impact only a connection with women in wise counsel can provide. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Welcome, everyone. As you heard in the introduction, I have the wonderful Lora Solomon here, nurse practitioner gone rogue into the world, like me, like the rest of lots of the other people you hear on this podcast, because the work of the emerging, the evolving woman, a lot of it is, I believe, to be the medicine. Not that we always weren't, but there was a little distraction called the patriarchy veil that distorted the view for everyone. And so many more of us, and those of you listening here are probably part of that collective that are sensing that, yes, we had jobs and then we decided to have careers and then we had careers and something feels like the calling. And I think women in general, some people wait and everybody sort of gets that calling midlife, quote unquote, crisis is really like this crisis of the heart. But there's some of us here that are these medicine women rising that get it earlier. And that's where I think me and Laura and I kind of convened as we were sort of sorting that out on our path. And, I'm going to share the screen here. Laura's new book, Wounds to Wisdom, Feel Your Pain, Find Your Power.
I actually have a hot copy right
here.
here.
There you go. This is what we're talking about. I mean, the tagline of this podcast is flip your pain into a passion. And if you can make a profit off of it, and that's wealth across anything. And I think Laura embodies this. So welcome, Laura. Tell us how you got from starting an OBGYN practice with your ex, being a nurse practitioner, being in traditional healthcare, to now sort of launching a course, going through your own journey, putting that in the book, and then now launching this course, working with plant medicines and things like that. Like, where did that come from?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Lisa, for inviting me to have this conversation. I love your energy and your passion and the work that you do.
Thank you.
And so appreciate your journey and where it's brought you and how you support women. And it just shines through everything that you do.
Thank you.
I want to, so I'm like, like every other woman's and human, my life has made me who I am. And, my story really, like all of us, starts, in my childhood. I was raised in a really strict religious environment. Some might even call it a cult environment. And although cult gets a bad rap, it wasn't all bad. There were some elements of it that were actually, we had a very clean lifestyle. There was like no alcohol, no drugs. We grew our own food. So on one hand, it was like a little bit, and we were very protected, like in a bubble. But at the same time, there was a lot of mental illness and violence that became somewhat normalized. So I said, at a certain age, I'm getting away from all this craziness and I'm going to be a scientist. So I went off, trotted myself off to college to become a nurse and then a nurse practitioner. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to have all this scientific knowledge and I wanted to understand how the world really worked and what was really going on and what was causing illness. And I wanted to be part of the solution. So, I went through all of that. And very early in my nursing career, I realized, oh, the healthcare system doesn't really make people well. Oh, crap. I have invested all this time, money, and energy into becoming this professional, and I'm not in a position to really help people be well. And so I kind of knew that, but I didn't want to know that. It's like sometimes when you know a truth and you don't want to know it.
Yeah, the revelation, and you're just like, oh crap, did I waste all that time?
Yes.
I'm, the right and wrong thing.
And so I was still trying to kind of, follow the rules and be that person. And, I was married to a doctor. So we were very we were very bought in to Western medicine is the way we're going to, solve a lot of problems. And then like a lot of people, I became ill. And really what it was unresolved trauma that caught up with me. And I tried all the Western medicine things and they failed. And so that was a turning point for me that I was willing to go a little bit deeper. And it was like once the veil was off, once I saw what I saw, I couldn't unsee it anymore. So then became this journey of how do I live this authentic truth? And then how do I share it with people that are willing, ready, wanting a different way? Because not everybody does. And I think about myself at a certain point in my journey, I wouldn't have been interested in what I teach now. It was too foreign, I've been very aware of the idea of cognitive dissonance lately, of how this clash between what we want so desperately to believe is true and what we know deep, deep, deep inside is true, and the kind of anxiety and inner conflict that creates, and how, and I think that blossoming that women go through really is their version of how they bring those polarities and create that unity inside of themselves, and your path has been in a way, is different than mine, but it's been your journey of, bringing all your parts together, your scientific doctor part and then your soul goddess part. And like, we're not going to be fragmented and split off anymore. We're like, no, we're bringing the whole package to the show. Like,
yeah.
We're bringing it.
And in that way, we could really, allow us to step into what I believe has always been our function, which is to be the model of that. Whether I always say, whether the Bible is real to you or some guy Joe wrote it and just brilliantly described the human psyche, who cares? But there's this story, and in other cultures, the same type of story where there had to be this feminine sided, or more heart centered, mind body embody, like literal embodiment of the cycles, embodiment of this of the the things, as opposed to leader or dominator, this sort of like, in
Mhm.
order for there to be partnership. And I feel like women, you describe some things like it's like this constant journey and this blessing, I think, that sort of has been robbed of us, of like, when you get your first menstrual or whatever, this is like such an opening door to like you embodying seasons, cycles, that connection you're talking about into yourself. And so much of that illness is that issues staying in the tissues when we're not able to sort of like model that process of like working through those emotions, or being the beingness, the human
Yeah.
beingness. So I love that, your book sort of is telling your journey through that.
Yeah. And, you bring up a good point, and I think this is true for a lot of women, is that their body imbalance, or their way that they're out of balance with their soul or spirit or inner self, starts to show up first in the what we would call the girl parts, the feminine parts, right? The ovaries, the
These
uterus,
vessels,
the hormone, right?
Mhm.
So it's the girl parts where, and what happens, you go, and this happened with my sister, and her story didn't turn out so well, but her first inkling that something was wrong was she had these horrible, heavy menstrual cycles. So what happened? What happens to a lot of women? They get put on the birth control pill. And yes, it makes the problem go away. Your heavy periods stop, right? Or you don't
Makes
even
the
have a period.
symptom that makes the symptom go away.
It makes the symptom. So then you have this
Right,
illusion that the problem has been
right.
treated. And now, what the only thing that's happened, and this is really on my radar too. I'm reading this book called The Romance of Reality, which is
Mm.
it's a huge book. So I'm not sure a lot of people listening would want, but I'll just kind of break it down. What it really sends the message home is that we are problem solving entities, right? That all of life is in a process of solving problems, and it is solving the problem that allows us to continue to live. And it is, it's on both sides. So even if you just think about the problem, right, of an irregular menstrual cycle, how common is that, right? So there's an opportunity there, an invitation to really solve what the real problem is.
Mhm.
But so often we don't. It's a missed opportunity,
Mm.
and the real problem gets worse.
Right.
Okay. So then you've got, X number of years later, now you have insulin resistance, or now you have diabetes, or now you have high blood pressure. So that's a problem. It's showing up. And instead of addressing the problem, we mask it.
Right.
And
Right.
then, but I mean, I think, I think we know that Western medicine is, pill for ill and all of that, but it goes so much deeper, even with addiction. Okay. If you look around at life,
Mhm.
human beings are the only life on the planet that have addiction.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what is addiction? Right? It's a response to a problem, but the response makes the problem worse. And it's if you really, really, really boil it down, right? And so let's say you have a child growing up in a home, and there's an alcoholic father and a codependent, for lack of a better word, mother, right? So there's all this drama, chaos. You have this little child, and the child is sad/scared. And right, so that's the problem. They're sad/scared. And then someone says, here, have a cookie, it'll make you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it does. It makes him feel a little bit better. So that's the origin of solving a problem, creating a problem by trying to solve a problem.
Or
Right.
go do something else, right? Go distract yourself, which will soon, as an adult, become workaholism or avoidance.
Right. So then this
Right.
young man goes off to, then they discover sex. Oh, sex can be an addiction/distraction. Oh no. Oh, now there's alcohol. Now, oh, cocaine. Wow. Okay. Now here's some opiates. So, but if you just strip it back, right?
Right. Let's get to that scared.
What was the
little
problem?
Boy.
The problem was an emotion that was overwhelming, and nobody showing the child how to deal with that emotion. Right.
Yep.
So it's like, in one way, it's very complex because humans are complex. And if you meet 5 people with addiction, their story is going to be different, and it's going to seem very complex. But on another hand, it's like, it's just humans trying to solve problems and not knowing how. And one of the biggest problems we have is we have these huge brains.
Yeah, we're bringing in, what is it, 24,000 pieces of information per second. And then we kind of filter out everything but I think 2,400 pieces. And then from that, what are you actually conscious of? So like there's a whole bunch of underpinning programming going on at any one moment, whether even when you've been doing the work, which is why, I think, a lot of the work into the plant medicines and some sort of understanding of that and tapping into that, but with that guided support, because it is a complex world now. It's not like you're in the insulary kind of. I always get so concerned, and that's why I love the way you work with the kind of the micro dosing and the whole complexity of just the human nature, because I'm kind of, people go off to these like ayahuasca weekends and things like that, and then you're going to wake people up to things and then plop them into this world again the next day. I mean, that's dangerous. It's like
yeah. Well, I'll share a little bit. So, I grew up in the, say no to drugs. This is your brain on drugs, and I was in this very religious, strict environment. So I wasn't exposed to any of that. It wasn't until about 4 years ago when I became aware of how, I'm just going to talk about psilocybin because psychedelics is a big term, but I'll talk because that's the one I know the most about. I didn't know that psilocybin had been used effectively to help humans with these brains that we have, to use them in a positive way for thousands of years. I had no idea. And I had no idea that it had been there, all the studies that had been done in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And then
conveniently forgotten.
Right. And then, and then we weren't ready. If you think about when psilocybin was made illegal, it was right when they were trying to get a lot of young men to go off and fight in the Vietnam War. And these men were using these medicines and were these substances and realizing this is kind of bullshit. And it was dangerous to the political narrative at the time to have human beings and young
woken up people,
right, to say, why are we fighting this war, and who are we fighting, and why, and I'm going to risk my life for, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to go. And anyway, I digress. But then, at Johns Hopkins in 2000 was the first current research on psilocybin. And so still, I didn't hear about this till 2018.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how is it that I'm a nurse practitioner working in healthcare, and there's research that's 18 years old, and I'm hearing about it from a journalist on the radio. I wasn't hearing about it in a medical journal or, at a conference I was going to. Now I did at an IFM conference, the gentleman who did the Johns Hopkins, I can't remember his first name, his last name is Griffiths. He did present his psilocybin research. He was actually the first one who did the research on caffeine and was able to show that caffeine is actually a drug. Now, it's the most commonly used drug on the planet, but it's
an okay drug.
It's an okay drug, just like alcohol, right?
Right,
But
exactly.
he did the original research on. So he's always been interested in how these substances affect our brain. And so I learned about that. And then I went to a retreat in the Netherlands. It was a 4-day retreat, and it was guided and supported. So I was not going to be, brave enough to go in my basement and take magic mushrooms, which people have been doing for a long time. Yeah. So that kind of began my personal experience, because with psilocybin, for me, it was the first time I'd ever felt safe in my body. In my life.
So important.
The first time. And because it was the first time, it's like you don't know what you don't know.
You don't, yeah.
I didn't know that I had never felt safe in my body. And once I felt it, I was like, oh, this is
what it's supposed to be like.
I use the analogy of an instrument. If my body was an instrument, it had been playing out of tune my whole life, and I got to hear my instrument play in tune.
Wow. Powerful.
And I was like, whatever that was, I've got to learn more about that. I've got to understand what that is. I want to experience more of that. And then eventually it came to, I need to find a way to make this accessible to other people who are struggling and not getting the help they need.
Right. Which is then why you take that other part of the road in the journey, right? So that you can be somewhat critical and do some analysis and do that. So it's like all comes back in the end, nothing's a waste of time, but sometimes the path, you're like, oh, I wish it could have been faster.
And I do think people feel more comfortable with learning from me. And I believe that I am able to make it more accessible because, I'm not what you would consider, someone who would typically be interested in psychedelics, right? I have never used psilocybin or anything else like that recreationally.
Right.
And that doesn't mean I have a judgment against it. It's just my personal journey. I've never taken mushrooms and gone to a Fish concert. Like that's not me.
Right. The logic there is purely from a place of, just like anything, exercise, meditation or whatever. It's like optimizing, like you said, the vessel we have, it's so sad that millions and millions of humans are walking around knowing more about the iPhone that they hold in their hand than this like highest technology iPhone that they are walking their soul and their mind is working through. And the concept of like, they know they never want to not have their charger or their phone charged, right? But yet we will wear ourselves down to like, dragging ourselves and be in that depression, which is not necessarily a dis-ease when you're brought yourself down to it. It's like a necessary process. So describe a little bit, like, what's the experience with you? Like, how are people coming into this? Like, who's doing this? Is this like everybody?
So it's interesting. What's happening now is that I have a fair number of therapists who refer to me because they feel comfortable doing that. They've read they understand the research, but they're not really ready to be actually doing what I'm doing, but they want a trusted source that their patients, their clients are going to be in good hands. And so, the way I work with people has evolved. So when someone reaches out to me, first of all, I have a screening process. This is not for everybody.
It's got to work for you, but you need to be able to have it work for you.
Right. And so there's some very basic things. So if someone is in an active addiction, they're addicted to a substance, I don't work with them. because there needs to be some level of mental clarity to really, it's not that it's necessarily dangerous. It's just not, they're not going to get the most
Right.
out
You
of it.
can't process when you're not present.
Right.
That's
Right.
the
If
thing.
if people are at the point where they are using substances daily to escape, they're not going to benefit.
Right, because this is
So that's
about
kind of thing,
this
right?
is true presence. I want people who are listening to this that's what this stuff is. When we're talking
Yeah.
about meditation, when we're talking about, even to the extent of this being assisted, it's if you are running from your life, if the now is something you just can't stay in, it's really hard
I mean,
to go to doing this work and having it be optimized for you, like the
right. And
experience.
psilocybin, a high dose of psilocybin will bring you so into the now right now. It'll be like,
Yeah,
and
so be
so
aware.
if a person is already not able to be somewhat present, then like I said, it's not dangerous. It's not going to cause brain
Right.
damage or
Right.
anything. It's just going to be very unpleasant.
Ineffective.
And
I mean, you wouldn't go get your car oil changed and have like an oil leak. You know what I
right.
mean? Like
Yeah,
you could do it.
exactly.
You could do it, but like, what logic is that?
And then the other thing is, most of the people that, well, there needs to be, they've had to have had gone through some kind of therapeutic process where they have some level of awareness, insight, and understanding of themselves and what's going on, some ownership of that. And the best case scenario is someone who's been doing that for a while and they're hit a wall. Let's say they've been in therapy for 5 years or 10 years. They've talked it all out. They know it. They could write a book about it if they needed to, but they're still stuck. So it's like their nervous system is stuck. They know better, but they're not able to do better.
Execute.
Right. Right. So it's that kind of person. And so then the way I work with them is I work with them for 10 weeks. And I use the hero's journey as a framework.
Me too.
So
Yeah.
so I invite them in and say, okay, you are the hero. You're in this journey. You have yet to be acknowledged integrated power that's coming to you. So let's prepare you for becoming more powerful, really is what it is. And so then I use the energy centers, the chakras in the body as just a map, a framework to help people to understand how energy gets blocked and what the beliefs are and what the stories are. So it's a lot about stories and understanding the body. So I work people for 5 weeks doing that. And then they have their experience, which is a full day. And then I work with them for another 5 weeks. And then, yes. So just, integrating, processing, making it, like if you use the analogy of an instrument, right? You go and you are able to get your instrument tuned, right? You have to have ways to keep it in tune. Or if you don't, it gets out of tune again. So even the most amazing psilocybin experience, if there's not a way to integrate it or keep your instrument in tune, it's just going to end up being a pleasant, hopefully pleasant memory. And like you were saying, I mean, people that do this, and I know people, they will go every so many weeks, months to somewhere for ayahuasca and they come back and there's no lasting change. There's no, and people that have been in therapy for 30 years and there's no lasting change. Their behavior's not changed, right? I mean, I'm thinking of someone I know that her ex-husband now, but he was in therapy every week for like 15 years, but still came home and was smoking weed in the garage every day and wouldn't work. I mean, so it's like, I don't really think that therapy, something's not connecting that is not. So I think it could happen with any modality, so, and certainly, so I know plant medicine is getting a lot of attention right now, and I think that's great, but it's not the magical thing that's going to be the fairy that comes and takes everything away. It's a tool, a really powerful tool that can really allow for a breakthrough that was very much out of reach.
Right. And I mean, like the whole thing, like you're describing, I mean, what we're talking about is like we've really got to shift to a model of you need to be coached. You need the therapies to kind of get that vision, and then maybe the mechanisms might be yoga, might be meditation, might be, plant medicine, might be a group, whatever, some whatever experience, might even be an experience, a traumatic experience, who knows, you get a breakthrough, but then you need to be coached. I firmly believe, and why I kind of left being a therapist and kind of really went into a coaching model, is that when I'm working with people through pain as a physical therapist, there was always that sort of, if their mind, or if they can't be present there, or whatever that trigger is, if their behaviors never change, I mean, I'm not going to say no offense to the chiropractor, because I'm going to say, but it's that kind of like literally manipulation.
Yeah.
It becomes a manipulation. We have to understand how we feed into that, because at some point you've got to help coach them. And that's what I love about coaching and peer coaching, even as our friends, right? Like, stop enabling people, let them. And the coaching's not you tell them what to do. It's not teaching. It's literally putting them into position for them to start feeling 100% responsible for their outcomes. And I know that's super hard for anyone who's still stuck in that identity of victim. And
Right.
it's
And
so hard, So I
it
feel like
is
that
hard.
stuff, the mechanism allows for that identity shift, but you do have to turn into some sort of coach. You can't treat people into that that integration like you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see myself in this process and looking at the hero's journey framework as a
Mm-hmm.
mentor slash
Mm-hmm.
guide.
Mm-hmm.
The Sherpa, the one who's walked, who said, okay, let me kind of avoid that, go
Right.
towards this direction. It's still your journey. I can't walk it for you.
Right.
Even if I could, it wouldn't be appropriate. I can only say, I think I see what's happening here, and I think you're going off
Right.
the
Here's my
trail.
360 view that I'm
Right.
keeping.
I see what's happening, and I'm really good at seeing patterns,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'm, what in my, a lot better in myself. Of course,
Of
we always
course.
have blinders with ourselves, but certainly with watching other people and saying, okay, I see what you're kind of going into, that victim thinking. I'm gonna catch you there. And I think it's an advantage for me that I'm not a therapist, because
Right.
I and say probably a little more confrontational than a therapist would be, and I with love, with kindness,
Yeah.
with compassion, like, I see what you're doing, and I'm not going to feel sorry for you.
Right. Right.
You're the hero.
Right. You're
Like,
paying me to get an outcome. So are we going to get there
yeah,
or not? I mean, I'm the same
yeah,
way. If you haven't noticed, like, I'm just like, we're going to call out the bullshit here. Like,
yeah,
let's just understand that there's no
yeah,
bullshit here.
yeah, yeah. And I think
Oh,
it's good, not everybody wants that.
right. Exactly.
Right. Some people are in a place where in that moment, they just want someone to feel sorry for them.
Mm-hmm.
They
Or even
really
just
want.
let them stay in that, like there's phases, right? Like there's certain levels of need, and sometimes people do need to sort of, maybe they're past, I don't know, I don't know if you found this, but I found there are some people where they're past being a victim, but again, they're not, they almost don't like see themselves. It's more of like a self-worth issue, where they know they're not this, but it's like they don't see themselves worthy of like this thing, this possibility, like this, there's been a story there. I sometimes see there's a gap, like between that old identity and that new identity, and it's in that space that's sometimes so tough to know. It's almost like you just have to hold them, like hold space for whatever way they're going to go. That's a tough place, because they ultimately do at some point need to be nudged out of, like, into
Yeah.
momentum, like there's an inertia there.
Yeah.
And while you see it, it's still, it's a process that's necessary, kind of like a cocoon, I guess, in metamorphosis. But at some point, somebody better open up that damn cocoon and emerge.
Right. And I think what I observe in myself, because how many people know better but don't do better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right.
I'm
That
raising
gap,
my hand.
right. Yeah. That gap
Right.
between,
Right.
exactly, that gap between knowing and doing. A
And
lot of people get stuck in that.
Right. And so the problem is that the fear of change is bigger than the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that, right, we personify it or we project it or we do some sort of thing. So, knowing everything you know and the work that you're doing,
Yeah.
what would you tell yourself 10 years ago if this woman now, this Laura now could, in theory in quantum, we can go back to kind of
Yeah.
speaking to that person 10 years ago. What do you say
I
to
would
her now and
tell
what would you
her,
say?
trust every step of your journey.
Mm.
Nothing is a mistake. Everything is unfolding in perfect timing. Trust yourself, and you're awesome.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right? Like you just like be in the now and understand, right? Like, yeah, like that is this
Yeah,
is awesome. This is awesome. Love
I
that.
would also say, stop wasting so much time worrying about men.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I'm there right now. I'm like, maybe I can go the solo route. Like, whatever, if I radiate out.
I would just
Um,
say, honey, 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 honey. It's not in finding that perfect man that you are going to
yeah.
be.
Well,
It's
I
not.
think it's finding that sort of like masculine, feminine in you. And like once you have that sort of sense of that wholeness, then you're in this place where it's like it's not going to be personified in a certain form. Like you
Yeah.
could get
I
it
mean,
from your girlfriends, your guy friends, your boyfriends, your intimate, your not intimate, like just interactions, like you said. It's like one life school.
yeah. I mean, I just said I would say trust my journey, but maybe I still have some regrets over how much of my life force I've wasted.
Well, that's, you could do the inner
Think,
talk. I mean, wasted or also maybe needed to learn for
oh gosh,
sometimes we're planting the seeds for someone else to sit under that tree. And I think a lot of us now in the collective that are the leaders of some of these
Mhm.
conversations, to some extent, we have to work with our ego. Like, oh, we may not necessarily be able to see the impact of some of the seeds that are coming from our wounds, like you said, the wounds and becoming wisdom, some of that. So like let's just take it the other route then, Laura. So 10 years down the road, with the knowledge and the wisdom that you say you're working through right now, what are you opening yourself right now to hear from her, who has walked the next decade and that
I'm
vision?
gonna say the same thing.
Mm.
Like, um, trust your journey, trust yourself. Because I feel like sometimes I get really impatient with myself and it's not necessary.
Yeah, the timing.
Um, and so like trust the timing. I think in this world where, like there's all these social media platforms and everything, I can feel like I'm not doing enough. Like who am I? I'm this one little voice with, you know, 60 YouTube subscribers, like
But
like
those 60 people might be the start of 60,000 others.
I
That's the
know, but it's
thing.
like, I hear sometimes, and you probably like these
Yeah.
influencers, and they're like, "Oh,
Hmm.
I only have an email list of 30,000 people," and I'm
Right.
like, Last count, I had 326 people on my email.
Honestly, I just, at those moments, Laura, and anyone else listening here, my point is this. I'm not saying I'm Jesus Christ, but he only had 13, and one of them was completely ignored, her name being Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And yet, like the two most silenced ones are actually the ones that did the biggest impact. If you look at what we're working with now with this
Yeah.
collective
Okay.
consciousness,
I like that.
it
So
was,
I go when
yeah,
I see that I only have, you know, 30 followers. I'm like, well,
I mean, it's all
Jesus
about,
had
like,
13.
yeah,
So
I
maybe
mean,
I
like,
can,
you're
maybe
ahead
I
of the
am going to
game.
have.
You're ahead of the game, right? And it's like almost finding your place too. And I think a lot of it too for people listening to us, like there's just some of you guys that are like getting this, and there might be some people that are like, what are these two ladies talking about? Like, if you're even here right now at this point in the conversation, trust us knowing that there's something inside you that's connecting, but it's okay too. It's okay if you're not quite there. Um, we've walked that path. That's the whole point. Like there's an awakening and a timing, and we're still evolving, and we're acknowledging
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah. I mean,
so tell
I,
me a little. I want. We have a few more minutes, and
yeah, sure.
um, I just want to make sure what's the like anyone listening to this right now that's like, oh my god, I would love to just work with somebody
Yeah.
like
So
that.
I
How can
have,
they?
yeah, I have a website. It's super simple. It's laurasolomon.com. And my Solomon is SOLOMON.
Okay,
So at that, you can find access to, so I have a microdosing psilocybin course
great.
that I get great feedback and people love that course. I also have a more robust 10-week course that is the same material that I use preparing people for and after a ceremony. So people can actually go on that hero's journey without the psilocybin. It's still really powerful work and it's all in there. So there's that. And that's also on my website. It's the Wounds to Wisdom. And then I have my book,
Yep.
Wounds to Wisdom. So if you are a little bit intrigued, if you read this book, you'll know, I say, more about me than my own mother. And because my mother won't read the book. Another
As we
story.
said, some people are not ready.
Some people, yeah. So, yeah. I have that, and yeah. So and also a YouTube channel with some
Okay.
videos on
And
there,
through
free
those
stuff.
things, they can get that, like you were talking about, that application or that ability to
Yeah,
contact
so
you.
in there on my website, there's a link to if you want to work with me one-on-one, and that's where you would fill out. It's an inquiry, and it's a little bit of giving me some information, so I can know a little bit about you because I want to honor people's time. And if what I do and offer is not a fit at all, then I want to make sure
Of
I connect
course.
people with, for example, if someone's on 5 different psych meds and they're just starting on this journey, then I have a referral source that can help them at that point. They're not ready for what I'm doing, but that doesn't mean there's not someone that can help
Right.
them
Right.
where they
So,
are.
so if they are interested at all, they should really reach
They
out
just
because you can
just
connect
reach.
them where they
Yes,
are.
I have such a nice network of people all over the world and in all different areas of this work. For example, I'm a network. If someone is a very strong Christian and they want a more Christian based approach, believe it or not, there's a whole organizations of just Christians using psychedelics. And now I've worked with plenty of Christians and I have a Christian background, but it's, that's not, I don't frame everything up
Right.
using that
Right.
terminology, that
Right.
language. But if someone wants that, feels more comfortable
Right.
with that, that exists. So yeah, so just reach out to me. If in doubt, reach out and I can help connect you with, if it's not me. And I only, I want to work with people who are a good fit because at the end of the day, I want people to get the results they're
Yeah.
looking for. And I want
And
to enjoy the process too.
right. Right. And everybody here, that's what you should be doing. I mean, that's the evolution of well-beingness is we need to connect with the right partners at the right place in the journey. And this is an inner game, guys. Everybody listening to this is an inner game. It's not just an outer game, and it's not just an other game. It's no one else's responsibility. Like, we all need to kind of be working together. So I love that approach, Laura. What, in finishing up, are there any sort of like closing words of wisdom, of goddess wisdom that you'd like to share at this point in the game, or just sort of leave us with?
Well, I'm going to read the very end of my book because
Okay.
I think it sums it up. It's final thoughts, but I might cry.
Do it, girl. Do it. Your stage, baby.
Give me a minute.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what editing's
Okay.
for. Don't worry.
All right. Okay. These are final words, but most importantly, I want you to know that you, as you are right now, are exactly as you are supposed to be. Sorry. Whew. I wonder if anybody else has cried when they've read this. You are supported, connected, wanted, loved, and liberated. You have always been and always will be worthy.
Beautiful. And there you go. That about sums it up. Beautiful,
That's
Laura.
that's
Thank you.
if you don't remember anything else about me, that's
You
what
are
I want to
worthy.
leave. You are worthy.
Yeah.
There's hope no matter what has happened, what is happening. You're not a mistake. And you're not
Thank you
alone.
so much for I think sometimes, what I just witnessed, and those of you who are only listening to us, was that surrender. And that really is such the power. There's another power out there. I know people speak of the gifts of vulnerability from Brene Brown, and I almost look at that like they're still looking at that as like showing your weakness and being okay with it. But no, it's actually such an ultimate strength to be able to, right, be open enough to really emote, to really, because that's the energy in motion, right? Energy in motion is emotion. And gosh, if women were not placed here to be the vessels of that, I don't understand, why people don't want that, because like that's where we need to stand in. So thank you for being a model of that, because that's so my mission is to bring people to light who are strong enough and able to, take that journey and then do something, right? Flip the pain, find the passion in it, find the love, find the freedom, and let's not make that a dirty word anymore, right? Like, let's
Right.
not even worry about being sorry about it. If anything, it's like praise be,
Right.
somebody
And
showing up like
and
that.
be
So thank
grateful
you.
for pain, changing the relationship with pain and
Yeah.
changing the relationship with problems.
Yep. Exactly. Like you're here for it would be like going to school and getting angry that they give you a math problem to solve. I mean, that's how we go through life, right? Like I'm so pissed somebody put this question in my brain. Like it's like, yeah, like what the hell do you think you're here for? Like
Yeah,
just getting out of the vagina was
you
really hard.
you've been evolving for millions of years, and that just to be this body with this brain
Right.
and to have the problem that's right in front of you right now, like
Love it.
you have arrived. This
Yeah,
is
I
it.
love it. This is it. This is it. Life is now. Life is
Yes.
now. Thank you, Laura. All right, guys. So I'm going to have on the show notes all those links to her wonderful course and her link to her website, and make sure you get onto the Owning Her Health main page for that, or reach out to one of us for any of the information that you heard here that you need some connection for, not only for yourself, but the beautiful thing is when you can actually be that door or that bridge builder for another. So definitely forward this episode to anyone that you think, might be somewhat in need of these sort of things, and show them your love with that. Thank you so much, Laura, for being here, and hopefully, guys, we'll see you next time on Owning Her Health. Take care.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.
Here, I just want to, if you are enjoying my podcast and you like the camaraderie, a lot of the people that are on my show are other health and wellness providers, very traditional health and wellness providers that kind of felt the pain and wanted to expand a little bit. And it doesn't mean you have to go off and be your own entrepreneur. In fact, many of my private one-on-one clients and people who have bought the DIY, the Do It Yourself My Body Brand Academy, are actually just looking to be entrepreneurs, maybe write a book like Laura, maybe get on stages, start expanding the way you can use your skills. It is super, super, super important right now that if you are called to care, If you have had your own experiences and you see ways you can do this, I think it's super important for us to start making stages for ourselves to just get these ideas out there, because there's so many people who don't even know that they have an alternative. And right now the system's, been broken, but it's really broken. We've got a lot of things right now, the end of 2022, we've got a lot of cold and flu, a lot of overrun, overtired, burnt out health professionals, leaving low staff. And what's going to have to happen is that we're going to have to really start re-owning our immune system, re-owning our health and wellness, re-owning our homes, getting back into being the leaders and CEOs in our homes as well as out in the world. So if any of that is interesting you, please look up www.mindbodybrandacademy.com. That's www.mindbodybrandacademy.com, or go on my website, www.drlisahollandpt.com. Get into my community. Start thinking out of the box. There's so many ways you could be doing the healing. And we've got to realize that there's going to have to be, a different type of medicine. And I do believe that if you're somebody that's listening in on this, you might be part of the change.